Well, so this week I'm going to catch up with my lectures and cover two art periods. It'll be Romanticism and Realism. Quick note, I know on the test that you'll put in the correct answer, and often it says it's incorrect, but I'm going back and changing those. So if I didn't correct it, then be sure and let me know. But for the most part, by the time I get to grade them, I do correct it. I know that it does that. So I don't know how to make it where it doesn't do that. So that's just a glitch in the software. So Romanticism, if you're following along, it's on page 362 in your workbook. Matter of fact, on page 363 is the art reflection for this week. It's the 3rd of May by Francisco Goya. And the statement, and then also if you follow along in the workbook, I'm on page 123. So the statement that for Romanticism, which is from 1800 to 1850, is it's imagination and emotion more valuable than reason. And that pretty much sums up Romanticism. Because basically, when you might think of Romanticism, you're thinking of giving your significant other flowers or Valentine's Day or something like that. That's not the Romanticism that we're talking about. Romanticism that we're talking about is people that see the world through a certain lens, an optimistic, positive lens. They see what's possible and opportunities. And so if you know someone that's a romantic, they might think the world is all good and they never see anything negative in the world, where the pessimist is on the other side and all they see is bad. And I'm guessing that either extreme is probably not necessarily the best way to see the world, but it's the way that some people do. So the romantic artists took this opportunity to make changes in how they saw the world and alter things, and they weren't so bound by facts and truths. So sometimes they would alter a painting just to make it a little bit so they could make their point or inspire the audience and didn't feel so bound by trying to get it exactly right. Whereas, say, the Renaissance, the artists tried to get the world exactly as it was. So therefore, colors, perspective, everything was as accurate as they could make it. So that was, a distinction between the Renaissance and Romanticism. If you look at, once again on page 363, at the 3rd of May, 1808, Goya is portraying this man being shot. And so, yes, this village was being taken over, and these events did happen, but did it happen exactly the way Goya represented? Maybe not, more than likely not. But he set it up showing these unarmed villagers being shot down by this militia and a pile of dead bodies beside him, and he wanted to inspire people to do something, to see the injustice. And so it wasn't necessarily true to facts, but it did represent an accurate relatively realistic representation of what was going on. The other thing that the characteristics during the Romanticism is the brushwork was loose and expressive. And so if you look on page 364, there's another example where Turner's painting, it's the burning of the House of Lords and Commons. And this is another great example where actually I've seen a couple different iterations of this, but there was a fire. It wasn't anything like Turner represented it. But he was making this point that, maybe this great institution is burning down. And so he represented the fire, but exaggerated it. And that's, once again, Romanticism. He, matter of fact, he even changed the tame, so how you saw this building, so you could get a clear perspective on it. So he didn't care about the accuracy of the geography. He wanted to make this point and represent this time and this event. Thomas Cole is on another, on the next page. And matter of fact, one that I always talk about in my classes is on page 366, Delacroix, Eugene Delacroix. And it's the death of St. Annopolis. And you look at this and you're not really sure what's going on. There's a lot of things happening there. But the story behind the painting is that this king, town was being overrun, and just as the enemy was about ready to break down the walls and take over the town, Sardanapalus ordered all his possessions to his room and have them killed because he didn't want his enemy to have them. And so this is an idealistic, romantic approach to life. Like, look, if I can't have it, then you can't have it. I'm going to kill anything. I always use an example very similar to something along these lines. Is there's a movie called The Usual Suspects. It's really old. Most of you probably have never heard of it or seen it. But it's Kevin Spacey, so he's still out there doing whatever he's doing. And they want to show how bad the Kevin Spacey character is. So they show that for him, his solution to make sure no one could ever get to him or ever harm him is he went and he killed his family. He killed his wife. He killed his kids, his dog, burned down his house. And the whole point was that if he did that, then he got rid of anything that meant anything in his life, and therefore no one could ever get to him. Extreme, right? But that's an idealistic perspective, and that's the romanticism that's being expressed during this art period. It's these ideas that people are so passionate about that they would do these extreme things that you and I would never even consider doing. So, like I said, on 123, in my notes, you've got your different artists: Goya, Delacroix, Frederick, Turner, Thomas Cole. We saw examples of all those. Yeah, so, and the biggest thing to remember for that is distortion, exaggeration used over a realistic representation. Emphasis on feelings over facts. So those are the primary characteristics during Romanticism. The next art period I want to just quickly cover is Realism. Realism was from 1825 to 1870. And just like many of the art periods, they either are building on the previous art period, pulling from a past art period, or fully swinging the opposite direction in response, in reaction to the previous art period. So realism, it was objective, unemotional works that were unadorned with imaginative flourishes. So just the opposite of Romanticism. The realists were trying to represent the world as it was, to accurately represent it. And so therefore, many of the paintings that you see from the realistic art period, realism, are not all that exciting, not that interesting. They're mundane, everyday events happening where they're a lot of times just trying to capture laborers. Courbet actually is a great artist representing this art period, and on page 369 you can see that it's called the Stonebreakers, and it's just two men out doing a day's labor breaking stones, and that's it. But that's realism. That's what the artists were trying to reflect, the everyday and the mundane. Another one I often talk about is 373, the banjo lesson, just representing life as it was. No commentary, no opinions by the artist, just trying to capture it as it is. But another thing that's interesting during realism, and I try to often capture like what else is happening in the world that influences the art period, is the invention of photography. And so during this time, photography was being introduced to the world. And so the photographers had this machine that all of a sudden would capture an event or a place or a time and be able to, you could carry it and show it to someone. And this had never been able to be done before other than having people interpret what they saw. So they were, had to trust what the artists were showing them, that was real, or understand what they were doing with it. Now the camera's capturing the world and everyone can do it. And so it really is representing the zeitgeist of the time where they're starting to try to see the world as it is. So accurate depiction of light, color, and perspective, an attempt to represent familiar and everyday people, and an unidealized approach. That's realism. Oh, and actually something that, so what really goes nicely with this is the painting that you looked at last week by Edouard Manet. So the bar at the Folies Berger. And the really interesting thing, and of course, I can't remember if I commented on this. I don't think I did. But one of the big things about that painting is that the perspective, it looks odd. If you look at it closely, it doesn't make sense. Because when the artists are doing a painting, they're trying to imagine where the viewer is standing to view what they're representing. And then you have the audience outside of that that's looking at the whole picture. So Manet, the debate is he either was really, really bad, like sucked, or he was brilliant. And that debate's been going on for years because the perspective seems so extreme and doesn't seem like it works. So they're thinking, well, he must not have really been very good with his perspective. But what you want to do is you want to look at it and know this. Manet actually was brilliant, and it was done during realism. So that means that he tried to capture the perspective exactly as it would have been. So just because we can't figure it out doesn't mean it's not correct. But if you look at it, and to make the man in the picture where the lady's looking out, and for it all to work from perspective, the viewer, as Manet imagines, is way off to the left. And the lady's standing in front of a mirror, and it's reflecting her backside as you look from that extreme perspective. And the man ordering a drink is off to the far right, so he's not in the viewer's perspective and therefore in the front part of the painting, but in the back. So that's where understanding what art period the art was created in can help you understand it and critique it and see it better. Let's see what else. So for this week, you've got your art reflection, which is the 3rd of May, 1808. And you have these lectures, one more lecture, and then you'll be able to complete quiz 2. That'll be next week. And I don't know, let me see. I might get you another exercise for this week, or we might just slack. So hope you guys have a great week, and I will talk at you soon.